This is Land of Havilah, Esther 4. In the last chapter, Haman issued a decree that all the Jews be killed on Adar 13. Now verse 1. Now when Mordecai found out all that was done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the middle of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly. He came even before the king's gate, for no one's allowed inside the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province, wherever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Comment: obviously Mordecai and all the Jews of the empire are appealing to God in the wearing of sackcloth and ashes, and by mourning, weeping, wailing, and fasting, but still the word God doesn't appear, which is consistent throughout the book. Now regarding the edict of destruction, verse 4, Esther's maidens and her eunuchs came and told her this, and the queen was exceedingly grieved. She sent clothing to Mordecai to replace his sackcloth, but he didn't receive it. Then Esther called for Hadrach, one of the king's eunuchs, whom he had appointed to attend her, and commanded him to go to Mordecai to find out what this was and why it was. Comment: in verse 4, Esther knows enough to be exceedingly grieved, but in verse 5 she's not sure she knows the whole story because she wants more information from Mordecai. Verse 6, So Hathach went out to Mordecai to City Square, which was before the king's gate. Mordecai told him of all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the writing of the decree that was given out in Susa to destroy them, to show it to Esther, and to declare it to her, and to urge her to go in to the king to make supplication to him, and to make request before him for her people. Hathach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Comment: now Esther is fully informed. Mordecai told her all that happened to him, meaning that it all got started when he refused to bow to Haman. Esther says to Hathach, apparently the most trusted eunuch appointed to her, verse 10, Then Esther spoke to Hathach and gave him a message to Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that whoever, whether man or woman, comes to the king into the inner court without being called, there is one law for him, that he be put to death, except those to whom the king might hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. I've not been called to come in to the king these 30 days. Comment: the king hasn't called for Esther in 30 days. It's not a good sign. If she goes to see him, he might not extend his scepter, and she'll die. Verse 12. They told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai asked them to return this answer to Esther. Don't think to yourself that you'll escape in the king's house any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent now, then relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Who knows if you haven't come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Comment: Mordecai believes God will rescue the Jews somehow. If Esther doesn't speak up, she'll be at fault. The king or even God might falter. In that scenario, the king or even God might kill her and her family for staying quiet at this time. She can't stay silent. She must speak up. He suggests that God's made her queen for this very moment, quote, for such a time as this. For all of us, God's placed us in whatever time and place we're in to speak up. We can't stay silent. We're here to be salt and light. If we're not, we're good for nothing except to be cast out and trodden under the feet of men, Matthew 5:13. Verse 15. Then Esther asked him to answer Mordecai, Go gather together all the Jews who are present in Susa and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I and my maidens will also fast the same way. Then I'll go into the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Comment: we can't do the right thing until we don't care what happens. We have to get to the point that we'd rather die than stay silent. The saints will overcome Satan in the tribulation, quote, because of the Lamb's blood and because of the word of their testimony. They didn't love their life even to death, Revelation 12:11. Verse 17. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Comment: Mordecai called on the Jews of the city to fast 3 days, food and drink, so that Esther won't die, and the king will grant her petition. Esther 5 is next.